The first couple things that the children would encounter in this community include a church sign, a bulletin sign, and the door signs. These are all different signs that would require the children to be able to read, but would be in different context clues. The church sign itself is very much like the temple sign, in which case the children become familiar and can recognize all over the world, no matter where they are, based upon understanding the name of the church and the words that are written on the front of the building. This requires the students to have literacies of letters, letter and meaning connection, capitalization, the name of something being a title or a noun, and connecting the object to the word. By the children understanding that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the name of the church and is assigned to the church building, they would be assigning the meaning of the words to the actual place they were at. This would also require them to have letter meaning and letter understanding. In a classroom, they would do this a lot with the title of books. They would have to look at it and they would have to connect the words they were reading to the book they were reading and the meaning that was inside. Very similar things that both require the children to have a more in-depth look at the situation. The bulletin sign is kind of similar to this, however, incorporates a lot more things. A bulletin sign is something that a child would see in the hallway of their church, as well as seeing in their classroom. In this way, the child might recognize the bulletin sign and the things on it after having seen it in their classroom. They would require the literacies of recognizing the letters and their meaning, the colors, the shapes, the letters and the word meaning, and connecting the pictures to the words and the meaning. Seeing the pictures, seeing the cutouts, and seeing the symbols wouldn't make much sense if they just saw those and didn't look at the words as well, and vice versa. This means that the child would have to read the entire board. To them, they might think that reading only constitutes seeing the words, but reading would actually incorporate reading where everything was placed, the words, the pictures, and the symbols together, and how they all work together to create a cohesive meaning. In addition to this, they might see something like the door sign. The door sign doesn't include any symbols or pictures, it's simply the text. In this way, a child might not be able to recognize the text at just looking at it, but they may begin to memorize the picture of the bishop's office on that one piece of tile. If they did this, they would be using the environmental print. They would be looking at the letters, the shapes, and the words and associating that with the place that's inside, much like the front of the church building. They would need to have the required literacies of the letters and their meaning, the shape, the words, the names of the objects, and the meaning of the letters to the words. This is very much reading the picture and the sign, since they don't really have symbols or images to work off of. In this way, they would have to read and understand what each letter was meaning, and they would need to do this often. In a classroom, they would do this with things all over, like signs that are over pictures, signs over the door, the name of the teacher on the desk, and other things like that that might be constant and they might find often. Some more things that incorporate reading the text and reading the situation include the church program, the scriptures, and the coloring books. The church program is something that children are familiar with from the time they're little, as picking up when they walk into the sacrament meeting. Even though they're not able to read it, they become familiar with where things are placed and what they mean, and that what we're doing in the church service is written down on the piece of paper. Although they're not able to always read what's written down, they assume that they understand because they know what's happening in the service itself. This is much like reading a book at school or a familiar object because it reads like a book, it incorporates a lot of different factors of a book, and they would have to use their context skills to deduce the meaning. This has the required literacies of letters, meaning, numbers, titles, and recognizing on the page where things are. Scriptures are very similar, although this is going to include a lot more reading out loud and being read to and understanding the literacy in this context. Children who are raised in religious homes are very familiar with scriptures of all kind, but may not start out reading them themselves because the text is very difficult to understand. They might begin by being read to before bed, in church services, or in Sunday schools, where they're listening to the words being read and they're connecting meaning to the words and the stories that they're picturing in their heads and they've been told. In this way, they're making connections between the letters and the words and the sounds and creating word meaning from that. This incorporates comprehension and speaking passages out loud, as well as thinking and understanding. This includes things that they would do in the classroom, such as listening to a book being read to them and not just reading it themselves. The third part are coloring books. This is often for LDS children who would receive these during sacrament meetings. The literacies for these include understanding letters and their meaning, pictures and their meaning, and titles having meaning, so that they can understand that the whole picture they're doing is incorporating meanings of pictures to letters. They do this in class all the time.